Tim Rose and Mike Quinn, rather.
Thank you. How are you all doing? Good. Excellent. Not really that old.
I don't feel old.
Oh, you know what?
Until we're not a...
Check.
First panel of the morning.
First panel. Check, 1, 2, 1, 2. There we are. Excellent.
I never felt old, except for I get a lot of people who come up to the table, and I know they're doing a complimentary, but when you told, you were a big part of my childhood, and you realize you were already an adult and working, well, most of the people around you were still children. That's when I realized maybe I'm getting old.
You were a big part of my childhood, too.
Gentlemen, I have each one of you just kind of introduce yourselves so that people can put names with faces and all that kind of stuff, and describe a little bit your role in Star Wars.
I'm Mike Rose. He's Tim Quinn.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
I like
exactly. Don't confuse me any more than I already am.
Who's first? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tim Rose, and amongst the things I've done in my life, I played Admiral Akbar, Salacious Crumb, and with Mike Sice Noodles on Return of the Jedi. And I was doing a convention in Australia, and when they were talking about Episode 7, they said, "So are you going to be doing Episode 7?" And I just laughed and said, "Well, if Akbar is going to be in Episode 7, there's going to be some young guy in there. They're not going to get me in to go into a full body suit at my age." And then the phone rang. And then I ran up to my workshop and pumped up the tires on the bicycle and started doing some heavy mileage so that I could survive the experience of being in a full body suit costume.
Yes, Mike Quinn. Let's see, I started out actually working for Jim Henson as a Muppet performer, and that's when I first met Tim on the Great Muppet Caper. And then we both performed Skeksis on the Dark Crystal after that, and which then led into Return of the Jedi. And we worked together we were always working together on things.
I can't get rid of him.
Yeah, so, but yes, so Nine Numb is my main character that I'm known for in Star Wars. He's the co-pilot in the Millennium Falcon and X-Wing pilot in The Force Awakens. Yes, there we are. Thank you.
Excellent. So, Tim, start out. Tell us how you got involved in this business that, I'm sure it's a cascading effect to you where you wind up, okay, now I'm part of the Star Wars universe, but tell us a little bit of how you got into this business in the start.
I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so I was trying out all sorts of things. I knew I liked drawing. And I actually started the university with the intent of becoming a graphics major and try to get some sort of a job in art. And while I was at university, I kind of stumbled into the theater department, and I found the acting rather fun, except for I didn't like taking the bows at the end. I was too shy. I didn't like people. They were okay looking at the character, but I didn't like them looking at me. And also while I was there, we started doing Renaissance fairs, and I just, for whatever reason, decided to do a Punch and Judy show for the Renaissance Fair. I went to the Herricks, who were a mom and pop marionette company that used to perform for the schools, and knocked on the door and said, "Can you teach me how to make a puppet?" And instead of shutting the door, they opened it, and they took me downstairs to their cellar where they had marionettes all the way back from the 20s, hanging all over the walls in plastic bags and everything. And it was, for me, it was like an Aladdin's cave, and it's like, you can have this much fun and have a nice house like this too. And suddenly a bell went ding. I don't have to grow up. I can stay playing with dolls my whole life and still earn a living. So that's how I did it.
And the same question for you. How did you, I'm sure there's a moment in time where you said, this is for me.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was little, I was into puppets. I enjoyed things like Punch and Judy shows and puppet shows on television. I enjoyed that and had puppets as a kid. But as I was growing up, I became obsessed with animation and I loved Disney and any cartoon. So I do a lot of drawing and thought about that as a career, or either that or becoming a magician. I quite like. I had a magic act when I was about 8 years old that I used to perform.
Great photograph.
And-
Yes.
But then Muppets came along. The Muppet Show came along in the 1976, and it hit big in England in the first year, earlier than it did in the States. So I kind of got obsessed with that. I was trying to figure out how did they make these puppets? How did they work these things? They were different to the old school stuff. So I kind of, as I was a teenager, was obsessing about that and started making my own puppets. And then I learned, I actually met the Henson guys in 1977. It was before they'd shot the Muppet movie, actually. And so I met them one time in London at an appearance they were making. The Muppets were appearing on radio in London, to figure that one out. But anyway, so I went along and met those guys first off 39 years ago. But I was still at school then. But then I figured out they filmed the Muppet Show about 30 minutes away from where I lived, which was kind of odd. So I would get on the bus and bribe my way past security and visit the shoot once every few weeks. So I watched a lot of the last season of the taping of Muppet Show, and they got to know me there, and I'd bring puppets along that I'd made. And then when I finally left school, I think Jim just took pity on me and thought, oh God, I better give him a job.
He said, this kid's not going to go away. We might as well give him a job.
Yeah, put him to good use. And Jim was good that way. So then their very next project after Muppet Show finished in 1980 was The Great Muppet Caper. So that's how it happened. So Jim actually gave me my first job, and it was downhill from there, really, wasn't it?
Well, when you go to work for Jim Henson for a start, I can't think of any other boss who was better than that man. He was the greatest boss to work for you could possibly have.
And it would have been his 80th birthday yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, he was great, yeah.
But it seems like both of you have a similar tale of just that love of puppeteering, and you open that door that people say, okay, this kid is into it, come with me. And that's great to have that, kind of glimpse into the world where people bring you in. And you both worked for Henson. You both worked on Dark Crystal, right?
Oh,
Yes.
And was that acting? Was it character design? Talk a little bit, if each of you could talk a little bit about what the process is like, because I'm sure that just like you kind of mentioned magic, you have to be almost an inventor with the tricks that you do, and the same thing with puppeteering, I would imagine.
Yes, definitely. I mean, like for Dark Crystal, we had to figure out, we did a lot of rehearsal for that, didn't we? Figuring out how to, actually, because Dark Crystal and Muppet Caper were actually a two-picture deal back-to-back with Lou Grade. I think Lou Grade wanted to make another Muppet film, and Jim Henson wanted to make the Dark Crystal. So they ended up, I think they shook hands and said, okay, I'll make the Muppet Caper for you if you let me make the Dark Crystal. So we kind of made them back to back with the same crew, right, in the same studio. And while we were filming the Great Muppet Caper, at the end of the day, we'd do film tests with creatures on the Dark Crystal. Remember that? So it was kind of an odd segueing from the cartoony Muppet world into the textured creature world. But we had to figure out, how to, there hadn't really been a precedent for animatronic creatures before, really, other than Yoda and Empire, right? So we had to figure out, okay, how do these guys move? How do they walk? How do we get their faces working when they're turning? And we rehearsed that a lot, didn't we?
Yeah, Jim was actually very, very nervous about the Dark Crystal because although he had done several puppet movies, there'd always been real people in them.
Yeah.
And of course, this was the first one where the animatronics, the puppets, had to hold the day. There was no actors to back it up or to distract your eye or anything like that. So it had a 4-year pre-production on it.
Yes.
And it's the only time in my life where, what we do as an animatronics designer, what you have to do is build a prototype that has to function like the production model, and you're lucky if you get 4 weeks to build it in. Yeah. And with the Dark Crystal, we got to make it, we got to film it, we got to say, well, that's pretty good, Jim, but actually I think I could do better. And he'd say, have another go. So, the fact that he put that much into it is why we're still watching it and talking about it so many years later.
True. Amazing, isn't it, actually?
Yeah. But he was really nervous. He was very scared that nobody'd like his movie.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that for people that don't understand the difference. You know, we have an image in our mind of puppets, and talked about Muppets, and that's kind of, and I think it being, yeah, just kind of as a layman, it's like you think about the difference between a puppet as being kind of something that I guess that you operate by hand, and then you talked a little bit about animatronics, and that's a
Yeah.
little bit more from a distance, a little bit more remote, a little bit more complex. Could one of you kind of explain the difference between the two, so we kind of have a better idea?
Well, the Henson thing was, I guess, I mean, Jim's thing was he always liked to try and keep the hand in as much as possible, right? So, as opposed to some of the other animatronic companies. So that was part of his secret, I think, is even, excuse me, in the Dark Crystal, your hand generally was still inside the puppet using the same kind of techniques. And back then there was a little bit of RC
We
radio.
enhanced the performance
Yeah,
of the animatronics.
yeah, exactly. And there wasn't a whole lot of radio control being used. I know we introduced some during the filming, but not a whole lot. Everything was direct cables for the most part for the faces, cable controls. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything
Well,
to elaborate on
I describe it as over the course of animatronics development, it started off that we were making instruments for performers to play, and by the end of it all, we've ended up making robots that suit artists have to endure.
that. Yeah,
We end up just using the people because it saves us having to work out how to make the legs move and all that sort of thing, so you stuff somebody in there, you know, it's, which is unfortunate because for me, the best stuff we always did was when we were making those instruments, just the things that had a few extra bits. And then you hand that over to Jim or Frank, and you really watch what a master can do with it. And it just was so exciting to. So, I mean, even when you made it, you know, what I loved was when you made something and had somebody else show you something you didn't even know you'd built into it. That's really nice, you know,
Yeah.
it's when you see a true artist take hold of it.
and yeah, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that has to happen with something like that. When you're working, say, your own regular hand puppet character, if it's a regular character, you're familiar with it enough to where you can just perform it without thinking. Like when you're driving a car, you don't really want to have to think about that. You want to, you know, you're thinking about what's for dinner or, you know, what's on your shopping list. You know, you don't think, oh, how do I drive this car? And when you're working a puppet, you need to get to that same place. Or you don't need to be worrying about your technique. You just want to get your performance across in the most natural way. But with an animatronic, you have a lot more things to think about. It's a lot more technical as well. So it's a lot more like, I guess, animation in a way. There's a lot more detail that gets put into a performance. So there's all these other layers that suddenly get put on that. And I guess it's pretty well the same, like when, certainly for Akbar, for example, and the characters you performed in Jedi and beyond, you know, you had 1,000 more things. You have more than one performer per character, for one thing.
Yeah, we have to suffer the bigotry that somehow puppeteers are not as good as actors.
Right.
And it's actually, I would contend that the opposite is true, because an actor, they're just using their own tool. They're using their own body, which they've been in for their whole life. So they think up something to do and they do it. When you're doing one of the puppets, we quite often joke that a frontal lobotomy really helps, because the one side of you is being the actor and doing the performance, but the other side has to be a technician and say, I'm taking this inanimate object and it has to do certain sort of cliched movements and expressions, because they will translate in the audience's mind into something that's alive and real. So you're kind of artificially doing a performance while also trying to do the performance of the living thing while you're creating the living thing.
Yeah, while you're looking at a monitor, while you're trying not to trip over cables or fall down a hole in the set, or,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Of course,
Yeah.
we fall down all the
Yeah,
time.
we do.
Actually, in the early days when I was first working with Muppets, he was saying you work off of monitors. And they didn't used to give us reverse scan monitors. I mean, now it's just like, oh, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and you can do it like you're looking in the mirror. But in those days, you got the camera feed, so you were looking at something so that if your puppet started to fall over, you'd try to correct it. but you had to correct backwards because
It's the
it was
opposite.
looking from that
Yeah, it's
direction.
not a mirror, the regular monitor's the opposite.
And the problem that I would get, because I was a bit of a TV-aholic as a kid, was I'd be doing one of the scenes, and then one of the characters would stop moving, and I'd go, oh, that's me, because I was watching TV instead of, I'd get so into the
Yeah.
fun, the fun of all the thing and watching everybody else's performance, I'd forget to do my own sometimes.
That's the
So-
weird thing. It's kind of surreal because you are slightly removed from your performance. You're watching this thing on a screen, and it's an odd thing can happen sometimes with your brain where you're performing the character, but at the same time you're watching it objectively as the audience as well. So, and that's sort of when I guess you have out-of-body experiences, and I'm actually working, but I'm not. It's odd. You're entertaining. You're being entertained by what's on screen, but you're still doing it live at the same time. I think there's a slight removal with the brain somehow, right?
It's not an easy
It's
thing
an odd
to do.
thing.
It takes a lot of practice to get it right.
I would also imagine that lets you know that the performance is coming through. If you can look at it and you see the character
Exactly.
and you see it as a performance instead of going, this is what I'm making this thing do, I would think that it's like, okay,
If I'm
you've
believing in
got it.
myself, I know I've got it. The audience is going to.
And there's a lot of
Yeah.
self-directing, isn't there, where we tend to direct ourselves we position our character on the screen to balance it out, right? We know what our eye lines are going to be for the shot and where's just off camera left or off camera right or whatever. So there's a lot of self-directing. We generally, I don't know about on Jedi and The Force Awakens. Did you ever get any direction from anyone?
No.
No, same here. Same here. Not one time. Not from JJ. Not from George Lucas. They never told us what to do. Right? We just did our own thing.
Yeah, it was so new. They didn't really know much
That's
about the
true.
animatronics, and especially on Jedi, we got to tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
Well, you guys that work for Muppets, how do we do this?
Yeah.
It's gotta
that
be
was pretty cool.
It's got to be a completely different experience to direct someone who is doing this kind of work, because like you said, you're watching the feed, so you know how it looks.
Yeah.
You can kind of make it work. It's an advantage that I think actors don't have, is because they don't get a chance to see. They can't do that all at the same time. So you guys both started out with Henson. That sounds like it was a key point in your life, and then
Yeah.
you both moved over and were working in. Both of you, I'm assuming because you were in England for the Henson stuff, got a chance to move over, and because they shot a lot of the Star Wars movies in England as well. So you both kind of got a chance to jump over for Jedi, right?
Yes.
So there were a couple different characters involved. You mentioned Salacious Crumb earlier, and that was something that you guys both worked on, right?
That was just Tim.
That was just Tim. Okay.
Size noodles.
Size
Yeah,
Noodles.
Size,
That's the one. That's the one. So,
Akbar.
um,
And
talk-
Nino. Okay, what we did.
talk a little bit about
It's
early-
complicated, isn't it?
The early animatronics were always done by several people. And it was one of the things we loved. With the Skeksis, it took up to 6 people
Yeah.
to bring one Skeksi alive. And when you first start doing it, you have to do it by the numbers. Okay, when I say this line, you're going to make the eyebrow go like that, and you're going to make the ear lift, and you're going to do that. And what's really exciting is when the whole crew creating this character all understands the character so well that you start to ad-lib. And that's when they really do. They come alive for us too. Even on set, they're alive right there in the room, which is kind of spooky sometimes,
Yeah.
but very fun. And with Akbar, there were 2 versions of him. There was the full bodysuit version, and because my head was in there, it left not a lot of room, and the servos were very big in those days.
Yeah, loud.
So I made a cable-controlled mouth for him. And unfortunately, while I was doing the dialogue, Mike Quinn got to lay on the floor.
And there's a big
And
long
mouse
cable
saying-
running down your leg, wasn't
down
there?
my leg and
It was
out
great,
the
though.
ankle.
It worked well.
And
That was good.
Mike was operating the mouth for Akbar. And then for the close-up shots and the big, it's a trap and all that
Yeah.
business, he was a Muppet-style hand puppet. I was operating the mouth with my hand, my head was in
Yeah,
the
it's
chest.
great.
Mike was operating the other hand and doing eye blinks and
eyeballs.
stuff.
Yeah.
And when he was in the cockpit with Billy D,
Yeah, you
I was
did.
it was my turn to lay on the floor
Yeah.
because I did eye blinks.
You
So-
and Simon Williams, I guess Simon Williamson did ears and you were the eye blinks.
Yep,
And yeah,
yep.
great stuff, yeah. So that's nice, it's good. And you sort of get used to each other so you can tune into their timings and cadences. And, there's a trust that has to happen, isn't there, too?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like just do you know, when Nine Numb looked up, you sort of track the eyelids up, and it looks like he's looking up, and use them for acting expression, not just technical blinking. And so that stuff that you just do automatically. Yeah, I didn't have to tell you anything. It's great. It's awesome.
That to jump ahead, you guys both got a chance to come back after
Heritage characters,
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
called. Yes.
after a few
That
years
makes
away.
you feel old. Yeah.
Yeah, legacy.
Legacy, yes.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine, I know that there's been so much change and so much advancement, CGI and all this kind of stuff. It means something, I think, to the fans, probably means quite a bit to you guys, that they decided to keep these characters that you helped embody and keep them similar in technology, similar to the way they were performed for the original trilogy. Talk a little bit about what it's like to revisit something, because I'm sure a lot of that stuff had to be rebuilt, recreated from scratch, and then you have to kind of re-inhabit it also.
Yeah, on Force Awakens, I just came in as a performer, and of course I knew all the guys in the workshop, so I went down there, checking their things out, and they were having a very hard time with Akbar's eyes. And they were shocked when I said, well, actually, when I made the eyes the first time around, I cut off some perspex and put it onto the lathe and hand-turned them and all that. Oh, you know how they go then?
Yeah, that's great.
So they were very grateful that I'd popped into the workshop that day to help them out. And it was a different experience. It was, I don't know about you, I'd never done so much signing on a set while I was working before.
Yeah.
All the people in costume, they'd all went and bought the book with the costume, so they all wanted you to sign it, and all the extras in their
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
outfits were all mad Star Wars fans, so they're all just like, I know you're working and everything, but you know, I just got a book.
Well, that's the thing, you know.
I'd never had that at work
Yeah,
before.
well, when we did Jedi, there were new characters. No one knew
Yeah,
who they were.
nobody
It's like,
knew
oh
who they
yeah,
were.
another crazy lump of rubber flapping its mouth or whatever. But, you know, we come back on The Force Awakens, it's like, oh, there's Akbar and there's Nine Numb, and I used to have your toy when I was a kid, and all this stuff, and it's crazy, yeah. I think the biggest difference for me was in Return of the Jedi, Nine Numb was a hand puppet, you know, a large Muppet, basically. But in The Force Awakens, he was an animatronic mask. So, yeah, they had to body cast me, and I had a face performer for the facial movement, and I could look through his eyes for the first time ever, which was quite interesting. So I really could become Nine Numb and be his brain, and suddenly he was left-handed because I'm left-handed, and it's great, you know. I could move around. I wasn't stuck to through a hole in the floor anymore. I could run and walk and interact with the cast just as a regular actor. It's pretty nice, isn't it, to be on set and just be part of that troupe, you know, and part of that history again. And very surreal, very, very nice.
Yeah, now it's a bit like, I describe it as if you imagine putting your head into a cage full of budgies, because with Akbar, I think there was something like 36 servos inside of the head with me.
And that was the training, actually. We had 6 months of putting heads in budgie cages.
Yeah, well,
You know,
I still got bird seed in my ear.
yeah, that's something else.
But, so it can separate you from your environment
Yeah.
because of the noise that surrounds you. Then you have to have your earpieces in to hear all the dialogue and get the timings right and everything. But then somebody comes up to try and talk to you just standing next to you, and you don't have a hope
Can't
of knowing
hear.
what they're saying. You can see through a little hole in the nose that their lips are moving, but, you know. What'd you say, JJ?
I don't know, just nod and yeah.
That's got to be a really different experience to go from operating a character as a puppet to actually then having, you know, embodying the character in a completely different way. It sounds like it was a very different experience for you from one to the other. How did that change things for you as a performer?
The approach is exactly the same, because, you know, the thinking of the character is identical, the timings are the same. The difference is, instead of the performance going through your hand, it's just the intent is now myself. So we would rehearse, you know, without the heads on, And I would just make sure my face performer was watching me. You know, you got to watch what I'm doing, because I'm figuring out in this rehearsal situation what where my looks are going to be and what my intent is and what I'm thinking. You know, it's mostly knowing what the character is thinking. So if we can both get on the same page, then it's the same as if I were working a hand puppet and someone was working the eye blinks or eyebrows for me or something like that. So really, it's not that different. It's just a different part of your body, but essentially, it's kind of the same. You know, it's acting, right?
Well, and you had to do the same kind of a dance from being inhabiting the Akbar costume to operating the Akbar puppet. What was that like?
To operating the Akbar.
You said in the close-ups, there was more of a puppet.
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to have to kind of bring the character to life in two completely different ways like that, I would think is different.
Yes.
Plus, didn't they give you a whole bunch of dialogue the night before or something, and before
Well,
shooting?
that was a big difference. Originally, we were given complete scripts, and we were able to work out a lot of business and things for them. And this time around, because of all the secrecy, we were given our dialogue on each day that we had to do it. So the ability to work stuff out and help them and things. What I was thinking of as you were asking that was, I had a scene that isn't in the final cut, and it was a close-up where I came up with John Boyega with Finn, and JJ came over and he said, "You're missing your close-up." And I had to say, "Well, Mr. Abrams, I can tell that you're this far away from me now." And then I stepped back and I said, "Now I can tell you're 4 foot away from me, so you'll have to give me something I can aim at. If you want me to hit my close-up, you have to help me." And that's something that's a bit frustrating. With Jim Henson, because he was in the pit with you, he knew exactly what you needed, and you always got what you needed.
Yeah.
And now sometimes they treat us like actors, which we are, but we're actors with special needs. if that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
You need to have help. I mean, with the original Akbar, you'd work out the movement and the dialogue, and I described it as breadcrumbs. You'd take little bits of gaffer tape, and I'd see what I could see. Like if I could see somebody's knee, I knew that Akbar was looking at their face at that point. And you learn how to line yourself up from the information you can bring in to have your character look like he's doing what he should be doing. So it's a tricky technical side of things to keep them alive.
Yeah, I remember Anthony Daniels was saying that he would put little, because he has very limited vision through 3PO's eyes, and he would put little LED lights on people's backs so that if they were walking through a scene, he could follow that LED and knew that he was a certain distance and he was going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So you use whatever tricks you can, or you count steps. It's like, okay, I've got 3 steps forward and then I have to stop, and you're sort of reaching out for things and hoping you're going to hit your mark. It's very difficult.
It's very easy to walk off set.
Well, that's the
very
thing.
funny in the outtakes, but
Yeah, you have no idea what you're doing, or fall down a hole. In The Force Awakens, we had remember that big scene? We were outside the Falcon. I guess we were coming towards the Falcon there.
Greenham Common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was all the extras, and my eyes were fogging up. I knew I could follow. What was the actor with the long white hair? That guy,
He was the voice coach.
Yeah,
I
the
can't
voice
think of
coach
his
guy.
name,
So I could see him, and I could see Greg Grunberg in front of me. It's like, okay, if I can just see their colors and know that they're that sort of distance, I know I'm hitting the right spot each time as we're all walking in. We did this a whole bunch of times, I remember. But so I know I'd followed them. I figure if they're doing the same thing, I'm going to be okay. If they're wrong, then I'm wrong. But on one of the last takes, I think you were in a different part of the crowd to me during that shoot.
I have a story about that.
But
okay.
yeah, but BB-8 rolled in. I think it was the radio control version BB-8, and I don't know if he must have rolled into the wrong spot or something, but I couldn't see down. So I actually did a slow motion fall over him, and once it started happening, I thought, that feels like BB-8 I'm falling over. And it was like very slow motion. No, and I went down in the middle of a take, and I thought, must protect the face, mustn't damage the face. And I was okay, I just sort of ended up draped over this giant ball, And then some of the extras were like helping me up, and they were still filming the take at this point. It was a long take. But yeah, like 6 of them were like, oh, let me help you up, I'm so sorry, and are you okay, you're okay? And the other extras were like, oh, I'm going to keep acting because, I might be on film and I might get, never mind that half the shot is ruined, but they're going to keep acting anyway because they might get their face on film. But I broke the antenna off BB-8 and I had to glue them back on, but everything was fine.
That was the story. We bought the DVD, so I was entertaining my wife with the stories of, you look at the final take that makes it into the movie, and it was Chewie bringing Finn down off of the Millennium Falcon and putting him on that stretcher.
That was it,
when
yeah.
we were all meant to be coming up there because they'd just come back and
Yeah.
everything. And in the original
That's
setup, JJ had said, right, well, you're standing there, and as it goes past, you look over at Finn that way and that. So in the first take of it, Akbar was like pretty much next to the side of this gurney or the ambulance that
Yeah.
was taking him away. And by take 5, because you can't really see, you think you're in the right place, but you can only try and hit your mark from what you have to look at. And there were so many extras that were so desperate to get their faces on camera
Yeah.
that I just stopped fighting. So the take of it that's in the movie, I think I'm in about row 7 by now.
Yeah.
And I just like, hey, I've been in a film before. If you guys are desperate to get on camera, go on, take it. I'll just,
Yeah.
I'll stay back here on this one, and
Yeah.
just watch. Because otherwise you just get stepped on. They can be very
Yeah.
harsh. Those extras.
Yeah, they were
Very
bumping
harsh.
into us a lot, weren't they?
We do
Some of
want,
them.
we do want to give people a chance for Q&A. The mic, I will take the mic over there, and you guys will get a chance to ask some questions if you want to line up. If you've got some questions, we'll kind of gauge how much time to save for that towards the end here. There is,
We can talk all day.
We
There
could,
is-
hey, and
there
we could
is-
do the
there
answers
is-
first, and then they could ask the questions. Yeah, we could do that.
there is one story that I have heard
Uh-oh.
about,
It's all true.
yeah, there's one story I've heard
It was
about
on
Salacious
LinkedIn.
Crumb. And I don't know if this is a legend or if this is accurate.
I knew
but
this was a story. Yes, sir.
But Salacious Crumb, you guys know the kind of the wisecracking little character that sits there with Jabba. I understand there was a bit of a run-in with one of the actors on set, and you kind of,
One of the people yesterday came up and he wanted a picture taken with me, and on his phone he had Harrison frozen in the carbon. And to this day, when I see Harrison frozen in the carbon, I get these horrible flashbacks. What happened? Because we had monitors and things, and because, I don't know, every time I put on Salacious, he really did bring out my sort of evil, feisty side for some
Yeah,
reason.
they take over. Puppets definitely take over
Yeah.
your brain.
Yeah, because we had the monitor, I used to tease the director and stuff, and it's like, well, you're not going to turn over on that shot, are you? You can see a light for a story, you haven't even framed it. And Richard used to really like talking to Salacious in between takes while we were waiting to set up. So this was the big important day of, does Harrison survive the carbon freezing or doesn't he? I think it may have had something to do with how much was Harrison going to ask for that movie and how much wasn't he, whether he survived or not. But so we had to film this, and that was the big secret of this movie. So it was very important. There was a lot of pressure on set. And the lighting guy said, you have to all be in your costume for lighting. And we said, well, can't we just prop the figures up and, when we're ready to shoot, then we'll get in? No, I need everything perfect. So 4 hours later, we'd been in our different characters for lighting before we did take one. And we did take one. He slides down out of the carbon, Carrie runs in, plants a big kiss on him, the curtains open, and we all go, we saw you kissing, we saw you kissing.
Yeah.
So Harrison went over to the director and he said, excuse me, but are all these puppet characters, are they going to talk over my line because I don't want to have to come back and do ADR? Richard said, quite right, and he came over to us and he said, okay guys, you did exactly what I wanted for the scene, but on take 2, let's do it in mime. Do the movement, but just don't make any noise. So take 2, he slides out of the carbon, she kisses him, the curtains open, and then as they were setting up for take 3, Richard came over and sat down next to Salacious, and I thought I was just talking to him up through the floor, and we were having one of our private Salacious joke conversations. But unbeknownst to me, the sound guy had left the microphone up on my mic that went to a floor speaker on the floor. And Richard said, "So, Salacious, what did you think of that last shot?" And he went, "Yeah, the shot was all right, but this Harrison geezer, is he going to talk during our laugh? Because it's really putting me off."
That was quite a salacious thing to say.
That was great. It was meant to just be for Richard. Unfortunately, with the floor speaker on, the entire technical crew also found it as funny as you people did. And there was one gentleman not laughing. He went to his room and said he wasn't returning to set until the bleep, the bleep, that said that had been fired from the production. So the AD comes crawling down through all of the sawdust and mess where I'm sitting underneath the set and said, "Tim, got some really bad news for you. You really upset Harrison on that one, and I'm afraid we've got to fire you." And I said, "But if I'm fired, who's going to do the character?" And he looks around and he goes, "Well, you are, but if anybody asks you, you got to tell them you're the new guy." And it was one of the things I loved about the...
I'm so glad the old guy sucked and the new guy was so much better.
Well, see, the thing
And cheaper.
was, I mean, these guys, the ADs and that we were working with, we'd worked with them on
Yeah,
Dark Crystal,
they know.
Muppet Caper. They knew us really well. And what I loved about the British was they're a military operation. They do whatever is necessary
Yeah.
to keep the thing rolling. So if there's egos involved or this or that, you know, they just take care of that, they massage that, but ultimately, we're going in that direction, and they just keep
Yeah.
going. That's
Now, you
what's
remember
great.
Chris Newman, right?
That's
second
who-
name.
that
Yeah,
was the AD
And,
talking
you know,
to
he
me, yeah.
became the main producer on Game of Thrones. Yeah, isn't that amazing? Good for him.
All right, we've got some people lined up for, here you go. I'll just bring it down here to you. There you go.
Hi. So you talked about all the servos that are in the heads. So I guess a question is, do you put like a hair cap on or something, or to protect your hair, or does it?
We might.
Sometimes.
It isn't so much to protect your hair, it's to absorb layers
Yeah.
of moisture.
Yeah, we have little hoods, black hoods that we can put on that are made to fit our heads. But we have a fiberglass skull usually that's cast to the shape of our head. So sometimes I wore mine and sometimes I didn't. You know.
You try and get them off as quick as you can when
Yeah.
you come out, in case there's any behind-the-scenes people shooting, because you really do look like a...
A mess. And it's terrible for the hair.
Thank you.
So yeah, they get kind of hot, but we're sort of protected from the servos generally. So with layers of fiberglass and such.
Hi, my question is, did either of you see any of the behind-the-scenes stuff for the Muppet ride at Disney, or maybe the Hall of Presidents, or any of the puppet and animatronic stuff in, well, any theme parks?
For Disney, it's for the parks?
Yeah.
Actually, not really, right?
No. I got to see, I got invited down there to do one of the Star Wars weekends.
Yeah.
And they still had, I remember that Jim had that Muppets 3D.
Yeah,
that
the
he'd
Muppet
done
Vision
for the Disney
3D,
Park.
yeah.
I'd never gotten to see it, so I was able to run over, they took me over to see that. And at the end of it, I'm watching it, and all of a sudden I went, "Oh, there was the R.C. Kermit I made. He was riding on the back of the
Yes.
fire truck and everything." So that was good. I didn't even know it was in there, and
Yeah.
got to see that down there. So
Last thing Jim did, I think.
yeah, was
I got a question back to Force Awakens.
great T-shirt, by the way.
It's all right.
The animatronics for Akbar and Force Awakens, who else was involved with the puppetry version for that?
Funny enough, it's a guy.
Mark?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who is the exact same age as me, born on the same day.
Oh.
And we puppeteered together. I first met him on Spitting Image years and years ago.
Yes.
So we've had a long history of working in unison on characters and everything, and he ran my face for
He's great.
The Force Awakens.
All right, so it's
Mark
just two-
Jeffries.
Mark Jeffries, yeah, good chap, yeah. And I had a guy called Phil Woodfine work my face, And his first film job was on the Muppet Christmas Carol. I was puppet coordinator on that, and his very first shot ever was working some melons on a cart driving through town. Phil, man your melons. So that would be our mantra at the beginning of each take on The Force Awakens.
Yeah, he's a
Muppet
wonderful
melons.
performer.
Yes, so he was great. Yeah, we're very fortunate having our good face guys.
All right. And then one other quick question you may not be able to answer, but can you tell us anything about episode 8?
Yeah, it's great.
You want to see it, yeah.
It's awesome.
Hey guys, good to talk with you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a two-parter, so stick with me. The first part is in the time between Revenge of the Sith or even Return of the Jedi and when you got called back for The Force Awakens after hearing about, when Disney acquired Star Wars and the rights to this franchise, did you ever worry about them not bringing back puppeteers and these physical characters back and they might opt for CGI in Force Awakens and moving forward? Obviously that's not the case, but was there ever a concern in your guys' heart?
Well, he went to the dark side. I've always stayed with animatronics, and he went to Pixar.
Oh, it's keep your enemies closer, right? That's what it is. Yeah, I did CG for a while, but I saw a pendulum swing back already before then, where more puppets were being used, more animatronics were being used, less CG for stunt effects were being used. It was starting to come back already. And the fans in particular were, which is great, were very vocal about, generally they didn't.
That's what I wanted to say is thank
Yeah.
you guys for saying how much you like the animatronics because
Yeah,
they
it's
finally
heard.
started listening.
Yeah, it actually, it does get fed back into the system. They actually, if enough people say it, critical mass, Lucasfilm hear that stuff. And almost everyone prefers to see a rubber creature, even though it might be more limited. It's much more real than a CG ping pong ball Yoda bouncing around like a crazy thing. It's great that he can do anything, but it's not real. So when I heard that Disney were going to be picking this up, I thought, yeah, this is the best thing that could possibly happen. And the fact that Lucasfilm kept their autonomy was greater still. And I knew it would be better than any other option that was out there, which was probably nothing anyway. So I certainly wasn't concerned. I was relieved, and I thought, yeah, we're going to be okay. I know a lot of the fans at the time were like, oh, this could be terrible, this could be awful, who knows? And I thought, no, this is good. I just felt it was going to work out okay. And sure enough, JJ and I assume Kathleen Kennedy as well were a big part of keeping everything as real as possible. It was a wonderful thing.
And the legacy of Jim. I mean, I walk through the workshop there and I see
Yeah.
faces that were
Oh,
in the
yeah.
workshop on Dark Crystal.
And Labyrinth
So,
and
the
Little Shop of Horrors.
people who are doing the great animatronics are still
Yeah.
getting to work. So
Same
it's great.
people. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask really, really quick, who else in Hollywood or in TV, film, whatever, do you see carrying on this legacy? Because obviously we don't, at least us in the popular, and me, I don't see it very often, the puppeteering and animatronics in modern film or TV. So who do you see carrying on that legacy besides Star Wars?
Well, let's see. I know that Henson are trying to do a little bit of live action puppetry and animatronics in LA. How about,
Well, my legacy lies in Europe. I live in England.
yeah.
And the irony is that now that CG has gotten so expensive and animatronics guys have had to lower their prices a bit, because they can't charge what they did in the 80s.
Yeah.
I get a lot of work in Europe. I've done 2 Spanish films. I've done 2 Bollywood films. And for them, they're just moving into the world of animatronics because they can now afford to put a little bit more money into their productions. And it's really fun. I don't do this for the money. I just find out what the project is you want to do, and that tickles my funny bone, then we go. I just do it to have fun.
And how about commercials? Has there been an upturn in commercials, do you think? Or?
Yes.
Okay,
Lot-
good, yeah.
lot more live puppet stuff.
So
back.
it's kind of come full circle, hasn't it, right?
It was, I went to the cinema, and I was with the guys from the Henson Creature Shop in Camden, and we were watching Lord of the Rings, and when Gollum came on, I just turned down the row, and I went, you guys are young enough you can retrain. For me, I'm a goner. And I tend to, my wife tells me I'm too pessimistic all the time. And fortunately, I was very wrong about it, but, because even with CG, Gollum was fantastic, but even they can't put the amount of effort into it that character took, because it was fully interactive, and then they took the performer out, and even CG doesn't bother to do that now, so
Yeah.
you don't see anything as good as that ever again.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Hello. I was wondering, after that incident with Harrison Ford, did you ever like confront him, or did he confront you? Did y'all like share words?
Yeah, they
about
had a
that
fight
ever?
in the alleyway at
Oh,
the back, and I won't say who won, but somebody shot first.
Yeah, when I was working on Labyrinth, I was running around the back of the studio there, and I found his sauna. They'd undone it and taken it apart, so I thought, I'm going to take his sauna home and use it myself. So I didn't do it, actually, but I did find his sauna back there.
Thank you.
No, I don't tell that story. I have ultimate respect for Harrison because he doesn't play the Hollywood lovey game or anything, you know. I truly believe he's just as happy woodworking in his workshop as he is when he's acting, and I have a lot of respect for him, and it was just one of those stress of the day things, you know. He's a lovely man, so.
Yeah, I think he was under a lot of pressure. I remember.
Not as much as when he got crushed in the.
Well, that's
anyway.
true. That was some pressure. I mean,
That was some
like
serious pressure.
Offset, you know, Harrison was always very kind and friendly, and on Jedi, and you
Yeah.
know, he'd chuckle and laugh, and he'd be, you know, talk and say how are you and good morning and all lovely stuff like that. But on set, you know, when he was coming out of the carbonite and had all that stuff squirted in his eyes, and he just
It's
seemed
no
to,
fun. I could
Yeah,
see why
he-
he'd be
he-
grumpy and
he was grumpy for sure. So I think that was more about him than you.
covered in aluminum paste.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
One last question.
All right.
This one's for Tim. On the listing under your name in the schedule, it specifically mentions Star Wars and Howard the Duck.
Yes.
So,
Okay, I was in the
Part one.
elevator last night. I walked into the elevator and Stan Lee was in there. And in an interview recently, somebody pointed out that in fact Howard the Duck was the first Marvel character to ever be made into a movie. So I
Crazy.
said to Stan, I said, "Oh, I've been told I was the first to."
oh boy.
Anyway, that was
I worked with
all
Leah
the things I
Thompson,
could have said to him while I was in the elevator.
last year. We both worked with Leah Thompson. She was lovely, wasn't she?
I haven't seen her for years.
Yeah, she's very,
I keep
very
hoping
good.
I'll
Yeah.
be at the same convention.
Yeah, she did a Muppet
Anyway.
show.
I just wanted to know,
Howard the Duck.
is it difficult having some really good work stuck in such a terrible movie, and has Marvel talked to you at all
It
about
wasn't that bad, was it?
anything about any physical version of Howard, or are they just sticking with the CG version from Guardians of the Galaxy?
What I'd like to say about Howard the Duck. When they wanted me to come over and do that, the first thing they did, I was in England, they were doing it in California, they sent me 10 comic books to read so I could introduce myself to Howard. I fell in love with this guy. I thought he was just great, and I was really excited to do this.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, I went, but this doesn't look like the cartoon character. And at that time, because it's before Roger Rabbit or any of these other things they've done, the director felt that a cartoon character wouldn't work with real people. Of course, we, having worked with
Yeah.
all sorts of characters, went, of course it will, just let us do it, you know, kind of. But I couldn't convince him to let me go towards, because your core audience are the people who are the comic book fans, and then word of mouth makes it grow bigger. So I thought that was the first mistake of
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah.
And then it was everybody who, they were doing a 30-year anniversary for it, and everybody got interviewed for it, all did the standard thing, because with the internet now, we're not allowed to tell the truth anymore, because it's just out there all
Now
the
he
time.
tells
you
me.
know.
It'll get out.
So we all just towed the line and said our little stories, and then he said every single person he interviewed said, but if you turn off your recorder, then I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So there was that side of it with Howard the Duck. And
Yeah.
I really wanted to do it because he was the leading man in the movie. And that had never happened with animatronics before, you know, so I was very excited to get the chance. And I'm because my thing is animatronics and suspension of disbelief and bringing it alive, that guy was in practically every single shot in the movie, and you might not have liked the way he looked or whatever, but I think we kept him alive and moving and interesting through the whole thing, and I'm extremely proud of that.
Yeah, there are a lot of good things actually in the movie. I will say, you know, there's a lot to like in the movie too. Even though the big picture, people say, "Oh, it wasn't a great film," but I actually like quite a lot of parts of it.
In
There's
my
some good
opinion,
stuff.
as bad as the film was, it may not have actually been Howard relative to the comics, but I thought he was very well done.
Aw.
You know.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
All right, that'll wrap it up. We've got to clear the room so other people can come up here. Tim Rose and Mike Quinn. Give them a round of applause.